Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida podcast. In this show, we talk to leaders in the community, leaders of clubs, and interesting folks who live here in the Villages, to give perspectives of what is happening here in the Villages, Florida. We are a listener-supported podcast.
How can you support our podcast? This is Mike Roth, and listeners, I'm thrilled to share with you this podcast, which is my passion project for you. This podcast brings me joy, brings you knowledge, inspiration, and a lot of things that people need to know about the Villages and the people that are living here and what's actually going on. Creating this podcast is a labor of love, even though it demands more time than I can easily spare. But hey, time isn't something we can buy back, right? Now, here's where you come in, the unsung heroes and heroines. You can help us keep the podcast alive and thriving. How? By becoming a supporter. There are two simple ways that you can support us. The first is a small monthly donation. Visit our podcast website, openforuminthevillagesflorida.com, and click on the black supporter box. Even a small $3 to $10 a month donation makes a difference. And guess what? You can cancel anytime, no strings attached. The second way that you can contribute to the podcast is by making a purchase of an Amazon product at Amazon standard prices, and we are paid a small commission on each purchase as an Amazon affiliate. That way there's no extra money out of your pocket, but you are supporting the podcast. Check every week because we're going to be adding new Amazon products that you can buy and support the podcast with. Thank you. And your support means the world to us. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep those headphones on.
This is Mike Roth with Don Wiley on Open Forum in the Villages, Florida. Thanks for joining me today, Don.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. I appreciate you doing this.
Good. Today we're going to talk about some funny stuff about what's happened in the past and a little bit about what you've done. Let's start with the good stuff. You've been a county commissioner for how long?
About 2 years.
About 2 years. During the 2 years that you were in office, tell everyone about some of the good things that you've accomplished.
Probably the best thing, and people will argue whether it's good or bad, was last year with the fire budget. It was disapproved. I couldn't support it. The burden that was placed on our businesses was too excessive, and our businesses are an integral part of our community. We put too much burden on them. We needed to rework it. What they've come up with now for this year, much better for the businesses. It more appropriately divides up the cost between the businesses and the residents.
Divides up readiness fee as well as...
That's a whole different issue. But the other thing that's happened is we have taken the fire department budgets out of the general fund. Now we have our Villages Public Safety Dependent District, and then we have Sumter County Fire EMS. Both of those are pulled out of the general budget for next year, and everybody's seen the Villages Public Safety Department Dependent District budget. It's been in the newspaper, and the way it's being done, basically there's a fixed amount, and then there's a very small variable amount that's based on your property value. Sumter County's doing something very similar. The big difference there is that variable amount is much larger on the county side, and that's just because they only have about 20% of the property values and 20% of the population, so that variable has to be a much bigger part. The two fixed portions, the MSBUs, are very similar in size. That indicates that our two fire departments have very similar operating costs. Okay, so I did support the splitting of that. Originally, when I was on your show, it was 2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago.
The first one we did.
Yeah, you were the first guest.
We were talking about the independent district. I was wrong. The independent district, looking back, I'm glad it failed. Because it would have been a death sentence to Sumter County Fire. It wouldn't have hurt the Villages Public Safety at all. Either way it went, doesn't really impact the Villages. But on the Sumter County side, it would have made a huge unbearable burden that couldn't have been afforded, and it would have basically put Sumter County Fire out of business. So now we have the dependent district, which means that they come up with their own budget, their own expenditures, and then it's passed to the county commissioners for final approval.
Okay.
On the independent district, they had their own final approval. So it still gives us good county oversight on the fire budget for both fire departments. That has been really a big thing we've been having to deal with now for the last 2 years, is this whole fire thing. In fact, it's overshadowed most business.
And there was one more step now, because the individual homeowners, most of us have gotten a fire assessment notice of what it's going to be.
Yes.
Doesn't the county have to still take the second step to reduce the millage rate on the homes to do the offset?
So let's talk about that, because it's a complex subject, okay? It used to be that we had $125 that went to the fire department directly. Actually, it didn't go directly to the fire department, it was earmarked for the fire department, went into the general fund, and then the general fund paid the fire department. But that only covered about 25% of the budget for both fire departments. The other
75%.
the other 75%, yeah, basically 1.31 millage points came out of the general fund to fund our two fire departments. So now, what most people think is, okay, we've separated our fire departments, we need to get that 1.3 back. Yes, technically, if we hadn't done the radical changes we had done in our fire departments, that would happen. But one of the things that happened that most people forget is that we added ambulances to our fire departments. Okay? Before it was run by AMR, it had 6 ambulances. They ran for profit, it cost the county nothing. Now we've got, I think Villages has got 12 or 13 ambulances. Sumter County, I think, is running 4 or 6, I don't remember the exact numbers. But we're looking at about 18 ambulances on the road. Okay? 18 ambulances with an average of 7 people assigned to each ambulance, because they work in shifts. Okay, this picked up 75 people. No, 100 people. It's a lot. Okay, so there's that cost. That we've increased our service. Okay,
The level of service is improved, and response time should remain low.
Yes, so pretty much throughout the Villages and Sumter County now, instead of sometimes having to wait up to 2 hours for an ambulance, my mom took a fall a couple of years ago when we were still under, and fire department, man, they were right there on the spot, Johnny on the spot. In Station 45 responded, they were there in less than 5 minutes, helped my mom, then we waited for 2 hours for an ambulance to get there. Because there's only 6 on the road. If they're tied up, offloading patients or whatever.
So now we have in the county
17,
18 ambulances, so response time should be better.
Response times now are 5 to 10 minutes.
Costs are up because we have more crews on these trucks.
That's right. There's more operating cost. That operating cost now has to be, it wasn't in the old budget. It is in the new budget. So now we've got to pay for that. And that costs a lot. Now, part of the way it's paid for is through reimbursements from insurance companies. Ambulance comes, they bill the insurance company. Village of Public Safety does their own billing. Sumter County Fire does their own billing. Or the county does the billing for the Sumter County Fire. And those cover the bulk of the actual operating cost for when it's rolling. And the maximum tempo we like to keep that at is 30% of the time on the road responding to calls. When you get above that 30%, then it starts having a negative impact on readiness and on the people that are doing the work. You're basically overworking them. When I don't know what AMR's numbers were, but I'm sure they were probably around 60-70%. It was way too high. The other 70% is called readiness. Okay, and that's basically the standby time. That's the time that they're doing maintenance on the equipment, they're restocking the ambulances, they're doing training, they got to eat, they got to rest, they're working a 24-hour shift. That other 70% of the time, that now is something that can be paid by the county out of the general fund. And for both fire departments, that portion of their operating cost for that readiness component on the ambulances is going to come out of the general fund, which is going to consume the majority of that 1.31 millage points that people feel we should get back. Okay? We added a amount of service.
So based on your opinion, okay, how many millage points should a homeowner expect to get back?
Probably someplace between 0.3 and 0.5.
Very little.
About a third of it. Okay?
About a third?
Yeah.
So that would be fair.
So understand how much money we're talking about.
You're putting on 75 to 100 extra people
Yeah.
on the payroll to operate these ambulances and supervise.
So that annual cost for that 70% cost is about $1.2 million per ambulance, okay? It's, if I remember looking at the rough numbers, somewhere between $21 and $22 million that is coming out of the general fund to offset those readiness costs.
And the other side of the coin is if you don't have enough ambulances rolling and response times are very high, you have more people that die from simple injuries.
Absolutely.
I think that's a fair expenditure to keep people safe, especially since we have so many senior citizens here in the villages.
We do?
Yeah. Seniors, anyone over 50 in my book.
Oh, then yeah, we're all senior citizens.
And we have some of the very senior citizens. Don, we have an interesting scenario with you. You were appointed by the governor.
Yes.
Okay. And you served for 2 years. You stood for an election, didn't you?
Yes. So I was appointed by the governor to fill an open seat on seat 5 for the county commission.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already filed to run for the position in the August election. June 9th, I believe it was, I was appointed by the governor to fill the empty seat because it needed to be filled. It's difficult to run a county without all the players that you
Well,
need.
you changed from an odd number of voters to an even number of voters.
So you
which
got to
is a
have
problem.
those. Yeah. In August, we had the general election. I won by a substantial percentage, and I was serving my term. Go ahead and drop the other shoe now.
I'm confused as to why the governor could take you out of office to put back a man who was removed from office for lying.
Okay, so Mr. Miller, he was initially suspended because he was under investigation for perjury, and that left, actually, Mr. Miller and Mr. Search were both suspended for under suspicion of perjury. Or whatever people feel about the whole case is pretty much irrelevant at this point. It's ancient history. Because he was suspended, that's when they appointed Roberta Ulrich and Diane Spencer initially, and then Diane, after 2 weeks for medical reasons, as I understand, bowed out, so that left the seat open. So that's when I was appointed. I had to apply for it, and I got it.
So you were appointed to fulfill the removed commissioner's term.
Correct.
Okay, and came the end of his term, he wasn't available to go back in office.
So his term
Ended.
His original term doesn't end until this November.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So that's the hook.
It was, they ran basically, if you will, a special election at the midterm.
Which is
Commissioner Search, he resigned his position. Commissioner Miller did not. He continued to fight it. That's his right. So the state had directed to hold an election. So that's what we held. They held the election here in Sumter County. I won the election. Roberta Ulrich won her seat, but Mr. Miller was still suspended. He had not resigned his seat. He ended up going to jail. He was convicted of perjury. He went to jail. He spent 70-some days in jail. He was released. He also filed an appeal, and the appellate court overturned his conviction. Okay? Under the Florida Constitution, the governor then had to reappoint him back to his seat. And that's what Governor DeSantis did. He was fulfilling his legal requirements under the Florida State Constitution. Like it or not, that's what the law requires. I support Governor DeSantis in his decision. Obviously.
So now you're running again.
I have been running for the last 2 months, and yes, I am running again to regain my seat on District 5.
In that election in August, are you running opposed or unopposed?
I am running opposed by Mr. Miller. There is technically no Democrat running because Mr. Miller has filed as a Republican. That's his right. He can put whatever letter he wants after his name. Looking at his social media posts and his actions, he does not act like a Republican. He does not act like a conservative. But he is free to take whatever position he feels. I will take the position of a fiscal and political and moral conservative.
Okay, so that's really the difference that people have to choose from. Someone who's had experience, and how many years in village government in total experience do you have?
I've been here 10 years, and just about 10 years in service. I spent 8 years almost on the CDD 10 board and on the Project-Wide Advisory Committee. And I resigned from those positions upon appointment to County Commission 2 years ago.
Which you're required to do by law.
Absolutely required by law.
Okay.
As soon as I got the word, I filled out the paperwork, I sent my resignation to the district staff.
This is Mike Roth and Dr. Craig Curtis speaking about Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Curtis, can you talk about alcohol use and Alzheimer's?
They have had studies out for years that show those that have 1 to 2 drinks a day actually have a lower risk of heart attack or stroke. And in a study published...
That's interesting. That means that people who totally abstain from alcohol have a higher risk?
That's a difficult question, Mike. It's yes, those that abstain from alcohol, not with Alzheimer's disease, but actually had a slightly higher risk of heart attack and stroke. However, so this was a study published in June of 2023 in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology in stress signaling in the brain. So essentially, they had less stress, which we've always known is a risk factor for a heart attack or stroke. But the American College of Cardiology currently is not advocating for the use of alcohol to reduce your risk of heart attack or strokes because of other concerning effects of alcohol on health.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the village's community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
I know you're a dog lover.
Me? A dog lover? I absolutely am.
I like dogs. I had one for 12 years, but I always said that the dog owned me for 12 years.
Yeah, my dog has chosen which house I live in for the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah. Your dog's going to like the new house.
Yeah, eventually when we get there. Eventually when we get there. But right now it's an investment property.
Investment property, okay. What's the name of your dog?
The female is Lily and the male is Sully. They're both golden retrievers. Lily is very dark. Sully is very light. Very big mix of basically two extremes of colorings of the breed. Yeah, and that was intentional to get a good genetic mix because we had intended to breed her once, and we did that last summer. She had a litter of pups. 7 of them went home. 4 of them live here in the villages. 1 lives in Wildwood, 1 lives in Orlando, and 1 lives in Bushnell. And I follow up with them all the time. I get plenty of pictures from them. They're absolutely gorgeous. They're 10 months old now.
Okay.
We had a decision to make with Lily was, do we want to get her fixed? Or do we want to let her have another litter? Initially it was we didn't want to have another litter. But then we thought about the reaction of the people that we saw that took ownership of the pups. One lady, the family that lives in Wiley, she broke down in tears when we delivered the pup. And it was a very touching moment. And seeing the pups as they've been growing really is pretty touching, seeing how these people get attached. And we knew it was a good thing that we did. And another thing that we did was all the profits that we made from the first litter, we donated to charity, to 2 animal rescue, to 2 golden retriever rescue units.
Okay.
Joshua's House and in Lecanto and Mid-Florida Golden Retriever Rescue, or the Golden Retriever Rescue
So
in Florida.
your dog had a second litter of puppies recently.
She had a second litter of puppies 4 weeks and a day ago. And we have 10 puppies now. And our goal is, one of them we have given to the midwife who helped us with the delivery. She's giving it to her 6 grandchildren as a present. Yeah, and the rest are being sold. And we're looking at $2,000 a pup. And at least 1,000 of that is going to 3 different charities. I say at least because we're holding the rest back to cover our costs.
You selected 3 charities. What are those?
Once again, Mid-Florida Golden Retriever Rescue, Joshua's House, and I'm trying to remember, it's Hope. Oh man, I can't remember the name of it. They're one of my charity sponsors that I do on my video.
Joshua's House. I personally have never heard of that.
Joshua's House is in Lecanto, which is over in Citrus County, and it's a golden retriever rescue, and the couple that runs it are absolutely phenomenal. They take in, whether it's pups or adult dogs, abused dogs. Yeah, but anyway, expenses are less than $9,000. Then we'll divide that up between the 3 charities, or maybe we'll pick a 4th charity. I haven't decided 100% yet, but all we're doing is covering our costs and sharing love, because these animals are phenomenal. The good thing is the 2 that my wife has fallen in love with have been chosen.
You're not going to have to keep them.
Trust me, I would love to keep another one, but they're a lot of work.
Of course.
But they're so much joy, so much fun.
I was sad to lose my dog after 12 years.
I understand that completely. I've lost a couple since I've been here in the villages.
Just for our listeners' edification, As a county commissioner, can you explain the financial reporting that you're required to do?
Yeah.
And the other commissioners are required to do
Yeah,
the same.
so everybody that's either in office or running for office has to fill out what's called a Form 6. Form 6, you list all your assets, all your liabilities, and your net worth, any business interests you have, and all of it is part of the public record.
So that would include your Goldwing Productions?
It includes Goldwing Nut Productions. I used to separate my teaching and some other work I did as different businesses. Now I just lump them all under Goldwing Nut Productions.
Mm-hmm.
So my Form 6 from this year and last year is going to look a little bit different, but overall it's still basically the same.
So any taxpayer in Sumter County would have access to these forms?
Absolutely.
And that would essentially prove that there were no illegal payments made to any commissioners?
Obviously you can hide anything, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any offshore accounts or anything like that. I wish I had some money to squirrel away that. I'm just a simple guy. I know where you're going with this.
Offshore accounts are a lot harder than they once were. You can only take $10,000 in cash out of the country.
$10,000 in cash would be nice. Now,
If you try to send the money out via wire transfer, then it's trackable.
there's been some accusations that, oh, I'm in the developer's pocket. Okay.
I know you had trouble with the developer on Golden Weed Nut. Why don't you tell or remind our listeners about some of the things that happened?
So when I first went into business, which was 5 years ago, I had been shooting video, and I had one meeting with the village's Ryan McCabe, who was VP of construction, concerning what I was showing. They weren't happy. Basically, I was stealing their thunder, and they didn't like it. Shortly after I went into
When you
business,
say stealing their thunder, was that
I was
revealing trade secrets?
No, I was saying I'd look at documents that were public records, and I was in construction for 20 years. I can read a set of plans. I can read a set of all the documents that they prepare, and I understand what they mean. And I was saying, this is where, for example, the Water Lily Rec Center is going here, okay? And how did I find out what the name of it was? It was in the public records, but they were not accustomed to having to deal with somebody who was telling their story before them. They wanted to be in control of the story. I get it. It's their business, okay? Times change. Anyway, shortly after I went into business, I got a complaint filed against me with the FAA. It was an anonymous complaint. It was 130 pages prepared by a lawyer.
Anonymous by a lawyer.
Yeah, they didn't reveal what I had to do a Freedom of Information Act request to get that information, to find out, to even see the report. And I have a copy of it if people want to see it. But anyway, I ended up getting fined over $7,000 by the FAA. And for a startup business, that was like, oh my gosh, it was a kiss of death almost. Mm-hmm. But I fought it, okay? And I disproved the complaint, sufficient that the response letter from the FAA basically was, we found no evidence of a violation, and the fine had been rescinded.
Wow.
And I beat it. And there have been other instances over the last couple of years where the villages and I have been at odds, and they've taken various steps. They've done some saber rattling to try and shut me down. They've tried many times to shut me down. I hold no grudge.
Yeah.
They're trying to protect their part of the business. It's obvious, though, that they've started to adjust. If you saw the evening with the developer 2 years ago, and the latest thing from the VHA with Mark Morris, they pinged on the drones a little bit. It was pretty obvious who they were talking about, but so be it. I'm sorry, I'm beating them to the punch. My only advice is be more forthcoming. People want to know information.
They are doing a little bit more of that now.
They are doing a lot more of that.
They're releasing their own videos.
Yep, and some of that actually mimics what I do.
It's information that the public should have, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with presenting to both residents and potential residents what's happening here in the villages.
You know, my goal in my videos is to provide factual information, okay? Am I positive? Yes, I try to be positive. I love where I live. I love living in the villages. I love living in Sumter County. I'm not here to bash them. Now, if something doesn't sit well with me, I'm going to say something about it. Kayaking in Lake Okahumpka. There's lots of alligators and snakes in there, and it's really weedy. It's pretty difficult.
It's hard for me to call it a lake because of all the weeds and the small area that the kayaks are free to operate in.
Yep. And there was a couple other things that I took exception to that
But they
they've
could
done.
clear out the weeds, couldn't they?
They've tried that. They just grow too fast. This is Florida. Everything grows fast here.
Can't they put weed killer down?
No.
You're not allowed to do that here in Florida?
A water management district probably have a lot to say about that.
My wife lived on a lake in Michigan, and every 2 years they...
Unfortunately, the weeds are part of the ecosystem for the alligators and snakes that live in the water.
Oh,
Okay.
we have to protect the alligators.
Yeah.
Protect the people from the
So-
alligators.
I have a working relationship with the villages. They leave me alone. I pretty much ignore whatever they want me to do. I don't work for them. I never have worked for them. I took pictures of this past Christmas of the Christmas tree lightings at the request of the entertainment department because they couldn't get a photographer from either the media group or...
So you took pictures from the ground or from a drone?
Yes,
Both.
both, okay? So I charge them nothing, okay? And I want nothing from it. I did it as a favor for the manager of the entertainment department.
That's fair.
But
I thought you weren't allowed to fly drones over people.
I don't fly my drones over people. I was actually over the buildings,
Ah.
okay?
And the zoom lens is what fools us.
The zoom lens does wonderful things.
How big is the zoom lens on your drone, your best drone?
My best drone would be my Mavic 3 Pro Cine. It'll do 28x, which is about 100 millimeter telephoto.
That's optical zoom?
It's a combination optical and digital. It's 7x, which would be 7 times 25, so about 175 millimeters. And then it'll do another 4x on top of that to take it up to 28x. Once you get above 14x, it starts looking a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
But it does good at 14x.
Good. Don, in conclusion, can you give our listeners something to think about before we come back, just before the election, why you're the best candidate for county commissioner?
Why am I the best candidate for county commissioner?
Good
Because
question.
I'm working for all of Sumter County. Okay? When I say all, the residents, our farmers, our industry, our businesses, they're all an integral part of our community. We can't elevate one above the other. Everybody's got to be treated equally. We could take and put a heavy burden on our businesses. We saw what happened there. But so recently we had Costco come in. Okay,
That's
coming.
tremendous.
Yes. If we put too heavy of a burden on our businesses, then they don't come. Okay? If we put a heavy tax burden on our businesses, let's say a restaurant, they have to raise their prices because businesses don't pay taxes.
They pass taxes.
They collect taxes and pass them on to the government. And because their profits come after their expenses and taxes are just an expense.
In the simple sentence, as a candidate, people should vote for you if they want fairness on something.
Across the board.
Government.
Across the board fairness for everybody, whether it be our businesses, our homeowners, because they all rely on each other. And if we penalize one, we'll end up penalizing both.
So now, as a candidate, if someone wanted to contact you and ask you a question, how would they do that?
They can call me directly on my cell phone, 352-661-6175, or they can email me at don@gold.com.
Thanks for being with us today, Don.
Thank you, Mike, for having me on.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout out for supporters Tweet Coleman, Ed Williams, Paul Sorgen, and major supporter Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2024. All rights reserved.